am Conan Tobias, Editor-in-Chief of Taddle Creek Magazine, and we are here for what I think is maybe part 5 of our launch of Taddle Creek number 47, which I do not have a copy of. And I'm here with Katarina Gligorijevic, who is a writer and film producer, and she's making her Taddle Creek debut in this issue. She's going to read a little short story for us. All yours.
Thank you. The story is called Dana's Angel Oracle. Dana stared out of her office window at the parking lot below. She wanted to spend lunch alone, but it was her 35th birthday the following Sunday, which meant she had to eat mandatory cake with her podmates instead. Dana glanced at her phone. A text read, "HBD, are you coming this weekend?" followed by 3 purple devil emojis. AJ had spent the last 2 weeks trying to talk her into coming to a cottage he rented to host a weekend reunion of their old crew, and she had been entertaining herself by not giving him a straight answer. But of course she would go. "Real friends spell out the words," she texted back, and she put her phone into her pocket and headed toward the lunchroom. 4 of Dana's 5 podmates lingered around the edges of the kitchen counter, scrolling on their phones. Only Marjorie stood at quiet attention with her hands behind her back, swaying from side to side. Dana liked the way Marjorie always swayed, as if she was rocking a baby to sleep. Sometimes she thought about telling her that her sway was very soothing, but this seemed like an inappropriate workplace compliment. Dana sat down, waiting for Io to arrive with the cake. Most people chose traditional vanilla for their office birthday, but Dana found this aggressively dull, so she opted for Black Forest. "Big plans this weekend?" Lex said. "Not really," Dana shrugged, not wanting to talk about the reunion. "Just dinner with my family tonight." "It's so nice you get along with them," Jackson added, looking up from her phone. As they waited, Marjorie nudged her and did the most surprising thing that Dana had seen anyone do at work since she started there as an intern 6 years earlier. Marjorie placed a small box on the table in front of Dana. It was wrapped in shiny blue paper, and hand-drawn balloons were scattered cheerfully across its surface. Dana did not at first understand what she was looking at, because gift-giving was never part of their office culture. She glanced at the others who were exchanging looks of surprise. She could see that nobody would move until she opened the package, so she looked at Marjorie and said, "Wow, this is so unexpected," in a voice that she hoped implied thank you. She tore into the paper and revealed a box about the size of a smartphone. On it, a pair of outstretched hands blasted brilliant light into an eternal blueness. "The Angel Oracle," Dana read. Marjorie smiled. On the box, the following words were written. "You have guardian angels with you right now who are whispering loving and accurate words of guidance into your ear that can help you in every area of your life. If you're having difficulty hearing your angels, these cards can increase the volume and clarity of what your heavenly helpers are trying to say." Dana wondered how she had missed the fact that Marjorie might be religious. She left the impression of being someone who enjoyed homemade carrot juice, not being someone who believed in the pearly gates. Did anybody else in the pod know about this present? Dana tried to make eye contact, but the other's eyes slid away from her. "I know it's a bit weird," Marjorie began, putting air quotes around the word weird. "But it just screamed Dana. I know your birthday's not until Sunday, so you have some time. If you consult the Oracle 3 times between now and then, it'll give you a message about your future." Dana stared at Marjorie with an awkward smile. Io's cheerful voice broke the silence as he elbowed his way into the circle to place the cake on the table. For the rest of her lunch break, the present glittered in Dana's peripheral vision. She felt an itch to return to her desk and open it. Half an hour later, she shut the door to her office and lifted the lid to reveal a stack of large cards made of glossy, thick cardstock. Their gilded edges gleamed in the afternoon sun. Dana took them into her hand, shuffled, and pulled the top card. "Power Animal," the card declared. In the center was an illustration of a dark-haired woman in a pale blue dress, riding a unicorn against a backdrop of rolling hills. A pair of massive wings billowed behind her. Below, the sentence read, "Your spirit animal, your animal spirit, is a guide and guardian to you. It will bring you to the place you need to be and help you with your situation." What situation, Dana wondered. She'd never even had a pet. It suddenly occurred to Dana that it had been a mistake not to invite a friend to tag along to her birthday dinner tonight. Dana's friends all really loved her family, and she loved seeing them through her friends' adoring eyes. She tossed the deck of cards into a drawer and tried to focus on the rest of her workday. That night, as she pulled into the wide driveway of her parents' sprawling suburban bungalow and headed toward the door, she looked forward to telling her family about the Angel Oracle. She'd been rehearsing an anecdote on the drive, and she knew they'd love it. "Look who's here," her mother Joan chirped, her plastic bangles clacking. and she pulled her into the living room where her father and brother were already arranged on the chairs of her mother's eclectic seating collection. "Hello, darling," Dana's father said. "I thought you were going away for your birthday," Zach said, stretching his legs. "Here I am," said Dana. "Let her get settled before you start the interrogation," her mother shouted from the kitchen. She brought in a tumbler of something yellowish on ice, placing it in Dana's outstretched hand. "You look a little pale, honey. This'll help." "So, what's the birthday getaway?" said Zach. "I just leave tomorrow. It's only one night at some cottage AJ rented." "How is that darling boy?" her mother shouted from the kitchen. Dana smiled and took a sip of her drink. "Just wait until I tell you what happened at work," she shouted back. An hour later, seated around the dining table, the family was still speculating about what Dana's power animal might be. "I think you're absolutely a goat," her mother said. "Always eating everything, stubbornly butting your head against the world." "No, she's clearly a cat," her father retorted. "So independent and so beautiful." Dana and Zach made eye contact and smiled. "Remember when you were obsessed with porcupines as a kid?" Zach said. Dana didn't want to correct him, but it had been hedgehogs. She had several stuffed toys and even one tiny crystal figurine. "Are you calling me prickly?" she said. He smiled, and Dana felt warm and happy, as if she was surrounded by a group of easygoing chimpanzees grooming each other in a cozy zoo enclosure. Her phone buzzed. "What's the verdict?" read the text from AJ. Emboldened by the atmosphere and her mother's bourbon lemonades, she texted back, "See you tomorrow." The following morning, Marjorie's words were echoing in Dana's ears. 3 cards before your birthday. 3 cards and a message about the future. Okay, she thought, and shuffled out of bed to set her coffee maker and dig the cards out of her purse. "Tell me how the weekend will go," she silently implored. She pulled a card from the center. "Parents," announced the card above an image of 2 middle-aged hippies, one playing a lute. Behind them bloomed 2 enormous pairs of wings. "The divine truth is that parents eternally love their children to the best of their abilities," said the card. Dana contemplated this and sighed. "I saw my parents last night," she thought. "This is not a message about the future." She floated through her morning, getting ready to pack for her trip. It was cold outside, and she knew the sun would be setting early, so she had to get on the road before lunch. It was overcast as she got on the road, and the lights of oncoming cars from the southbound lanes hurt her eyes. She dug through her bag for a water bottle, and the oracle glinted at her from the side pocket. She pulled off the highway and onto the shoulder of a country road. This route would add half an hour to her journey, but it would save her from developing a migraine. "Since I'm stopped, I might as well," she thought, and she pulled a single card from the center of the deck without shuffling. "Cut the cord," said the card. Unlike the soft blue and purple cards she'd pulled before, this one was dark and foreboding. An armor-clad angel wielded a sword, and a crimson sash swirled around his body. Below, the card read, "Sever the fears that tie you to the past. Embrace the new life ahead." Does this mean I shouldn't go to the cottage, Dana thought? What cord am I supposed to cut? The cord between me and my old friends? The quiet 2-lane road stretched straight and silent before her. She was cocooned in the safety of her warm car, in the cool, bright circle of her headlights. She drove this way for some time, until she saw a car parked on the shoulder, hazard lights blinking. A man was standing in the road, waving frantically. This is how serial killers attract their victims, Dana thought. As she inched past the man, he looked helplessly at her, and she peered into the open back door of his vehicle. She saw a shadowy figure on the back seat and decided not to stop. She turned her head back toward the road, just in time to see a small dark shape enter the illuminated space in front of her. She slammed her foot on the brake, and her head hit the headrest with a dull thud. It was a small gray hedgehog, ambling past her car and undisturbed by the headlights, in no hurry to reach the other side. Do hedgehogs live in the wild in Ontario, Dana asked herself as she swerved onto the shoulder and got out of the car. She jogged back toward the man. Did you have an accident? She shouted at him. No, my wife is in labor, he shouted back. The midwife told us to head to the hospital, but things took a turn, so I pulled over. The ambulance is 10 minutes away. I don't think she has that much time. His words tumbled out of him and landed at Dana's feet. Okay, she said, what do we do? She wants to push, he said. Well, we should help her while we wait for the ambulance, Dana said, unsure of what helping might actually entail. She walked to the back of the car where the woman was moaning to herself. Babe, the woman shouted, and the man ran toward the car and thrust his hand in through the open window for her to squeeze. She held on to him until both their knuckles turned white, and the wave passed, and then she shoved his hand away. I'm Dana, Dana said, feeling unhelpful. If you tell me what you need, I'll try to do it. I need to push, said the woman. Can you hold on a few minutes longer, Dana asked. No, said the woman. Dana took off her coat and threw it on the ground in front of the open car door. She knelt onto it and said, Come on, scooch a bit closer to me. Do you know what you're doing, the man asked. I do not, said Dana, feeling frantic and very angry at the hedgehog. What's your name, she said, turning to the woman. I'm Carrie, the woman said between hard, shallow breaths. Okay, Carrie, I'm not a doctor or a nurse or a mother, but my best friend described her home birth to me, so I think I know what to do. Do you trust me? No, the woman shouted. Great, said Dana, looking under the woman's dress. I'm pretty sure I see the baby's head, so take a deep breath and then push hard, okay? I feel it now. Big breath, big push. The woman took a sharp breath, gripping the seat and letting a slow hiss of air escape her lips. Holy shit, said Dana, I think you're really doing it, Carrie. She touched the woman's knees and her body shook as she started pushing again, her face red and contorted. Dana could see the head of the baby, glistening with goo, emerging slowly from the woman. Blood was everywhere, getting on Dana's shirt and all over the car. The man paced, looking in both directions for an ambulance that none of them could hear. He took off his coat and then his t-shirt, and then put the coat on over his naked torso and held the t-shirt out to Dana. Carrie pushed one more time with a shrill scream. Dana stuck out her hands, and the baby's entire slippery body flew out toward her. She caught it firmly and said, It's a baby, you had a baby. Dana wiped the baby's mouth and it uttered a squeak and then a cry. The man knelt beside her and took the baby from her arms. It's a girl, he whispered, and wrapped her in the t-shirt. He handed the tiny wet bundle to his wife. What do we do now, Dana asked, the anxiety returning to her body in a wave. Do we have to cut the cord, the man said. Power animal. Parents. Cord. I have a Swiss Army knife on my keychain, said Dana, and she fished her keys out of her pocket, which was crumpled beneath her knees. It's surprisingly sharp. Her hands were covered in afterbirth. Strange fluids ran together in the car. Is it okay that she's still bleeding, the man asked. The paramedics are going to give her a drug to stop that, said Dana with confidence, and she picked at the tiny Swiss Army knife, her hands slick with amniotic fluid. She pulled out the sharp blade, disconnected the knife from her keychain, and held it to the man. Would you like to do it, she asked. He looked solemnly at his wife. Maybe we should wait for the ambulance. Yeah, maybe, Dana agreed. I'm not sure where the other end is. She hasn't passed the placenta yet, said the man. They explained that in the birth class. And just then a siren filled the air, and the man leapt up to flag them down, and within minutes there were flashing lights and machines and beeping noises, and a stretcher and two competent-looking paramedics. Dana shuffled toward her car as the man climbed into the ambulance. Thank you, he shouted at her. I never got your name, she said. It's Perry. Carrie and Perry, that's so cute, she said. And as the paramedics were getting ready to go, Dana remembered the Swiss Army knife and shouted, You can keep the knife as a memento, just as the doors of the ambulance were closing. Dana slumped onto the gravel shoulder, wiped her hands on her ruined t-shirt, and heard a scratching noise to her left. The hedgehog was still hanging around, looking at her. Do you want to come to a cottage, buddy? She asked it, and slid her phone out of her pocket. She pulled up AJ's number and texted, Hey, almost there. And then she picked up the hedgehog, got into her car, and headed north.